Well, happy October, everyone. Anyone else love the month of October like me? Okay, I'm a big leaf change, I like fan girl over the leaves. I'm like, oh, that's the best tree ever. So I love the changing of leaves. But as Brent said, we are continuing this series called How to Friend. And we're just taking this idea of friendship and looking at how these can be very complicated yet life-giving relationships. And we determined week one that friendships are incredibly important, but we would all recognize they're just a little bit more complicated and harder to do as adults. I've heard it said that it's just easier when you're 6 years old. You go up to someone, you're like, "Are you 6?" Like, "I'm 6. Do you want to be best friends?" They're like, "Yes, I do." And then you pretty much hit it off, right? You wish that you could do that. It's like, "Hey, I'm in my 40s, you're in your 40s. Should we be best friends?" And they're like, "Yeah, that'd be great." Unfortunately, we know as adults it doesn't work that way. And yet, despite being the most connected generation, research would say we are also the loneliest. That we may be surrounded by people in our worlds and on social media, but many would say that they lack meaningful relationships. And I think that we have a lot of natural things working against us, right? We're busy. We tend to move around a lot, so we're not always in the same spot for long periods of time. We have jobs that require a lot of us. We're kind of all over the place. The sheer fact that family life actually requires more time than it has in the past. And then technology, right? Technology obviously can help and can help us stay connected, but it can also hurt. Technology is not as great at giving us kind of acquaintances, but it's not really great at giving us meaningful, real friends. Robert Dunbar wrote a book on friendship, and he talks about this idea of these kind of concentric circles when it comes to our relationships. And he argued that just based on our human brain and function and how much we can handle up to about 150 relationships, friendships in our lives. And so for the extroverts in the room, you're like, "Yeah, 150, that sounds awesome." For the introverts, you're like, 150? Gee whiz, I do not want that many friends. That's okay. So as introverts, that number kind of gets closer, but the max would be 150. So if you see there's these known names, and then there's acquaintances, but to break from the acquaintances into a friendship requires something, right? An acquaintance is someone you know of, you see them, you wave, but there's no real purpose or plan to get to know one another, get to do anything more than just when you happen to bump into each other. But then there's friends, and then good friends, and best friends, and close friends. And these close friends are kind of those people who really the shoulder to cry on. They're the people you can call when things get hard or when you need advice or whatever that looks like. And so what we're talking about in this series is how do we kind of cultivate those inner circle friendships, those ones that kind of move beyond just the acquaintances into friends and good friends and close friends and best friends. And John reminded us last week that in this series that we are actually designed for this. We are actually designed with a need for relationships and friendships. And choosing the right people and who are in our lives, who kind of get closer to our heart and our soul, that is deeply matters to us. And who we allow to let in, to speak into our lives is important. But in this series, we have not titled this series How to Pick Friends, although that would arguably be a really good series. But in this series, it is How Do We Friend? And his first 2 points the first week were to, one, be intentional, that it takes intentionality with our relationships, that we don't just bump into somebody and happen to become friends. There's intentionality by shared interests and shared values and taking the time to step out and say, "Hey, do you want to connect? Do you want to get together? Do you want to do something together?" The second thing he talked about is just give it time. Research would say in order to kind of get into that closer knit circle, that friendship circle, it requires 200 hours of logged, shared, meaningful time together. So I don't want that to be discouraging. You're like, "Well, that's never going to happen." It's actually possible, but you have to give yourself time. That if one hangout or one thing that you do doesn't result in deeply knowing best friends, that's okay because it does require time. Then Jake taught us last week that friendship is a verb, and that as friends, we carry each other's burdens. That we show up for one another, that we see the things that we're carrying and we say, "Hey, I will help carry that with you." And then this week, I want to swing for the fences. And I would like to add 4 more things to this list that I think I have been learning and I have been challenged by over the last few years. I think I will just make the disclaimer, I am not standing up here as the perfect friend. I think my friends would tell you that. But I have learned a lot as I've paid attention to what it takes and what it requires to have meaningful relationships. Andy Stanley, a pastor of a church in Atlanta, said in a sermon a few years ago, kind of in a relationship series, he said, be the kind of person that the person you're looking for is looking for. I'll say it again, be the kind of person that the person you're looking for as your friend is looking for. I think that's the question that we're trying to explore and answer today. Because as much as we are the guardians of those who have influence on us, I want to ask, how is your influence, how is your impact on others? Are you the kind of person, are you the kind of friend that is good for others? Am I the kind of person, the kind of friend that has the character to fit into someone's inner circle? And notice I didn't say personality. I think God gave us all kinds of different personalities, and thank God for that. Right? Thank God for our different perspectives and how we see the world. Thank God that we are not all created alike. There's not just one personality that happens to be better when it comes to friendship. Each personality comes with its own strengths, and each personality comes with its own struggles. And while some personalities, sure, may just jive together better than others, there is not a magic combination when it comes to this. Because what matters more than personality is our character and the way that we choose to engage with the people that we call friends. And it's our character, and I'd argue also our habits, the habits that we build that allow us to truly invest in people's lives deeply and to make it safe for others to invest in us. And as always, like if I am ever gonna give a message, there's always gonna be some kind of disclaimer. Like, here's what I'm not saying, right? So here it goes. This is not to go down a path of people pleasing. Right? We don't want to do like this thing called performance friendship where we're just like seeking others' approval and running around trying to do that, right? We're not trying to run around and like be something for someone else. So we're not talking about people pleasing. But I do think that there are some things that we could learn together on how to friend. I recently just started learning about TikTok, which I know I'm showing my age here. I'm real sorry. But honestly, like I would open it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, so people just like share their thoughts or opinions or like stitch a video, or maybe they do a dance and then they post about it. And yeah, that's exactly what TikTok is. Just TikTok in a nutshell. And because I'm a 41-year-old woman, my initial feed was filled with all kinds of other women my age doing something to this effect, right? Sharing a thought or an opinion or doing a prank on their friend or spouse or something to that gist. Then there's this other theme that kept popping up over and over and over again in my feed. And it's basically this, like it's like someone my age just like freely dancing around, not choreographed. That's like another level. But this is just like spinning, yeah, well, I'm so happy with like fun music. And then this long paragraph like slapped on top of it to something along the lines of like, if you don't like me, if you don't like who I am, then you can just see your way out the door because I'm not spending any more time trying to please people or anybody else. Something to that gist. And to that, I kind of say right on, right? I get it. There's freedom in not putting pressure on ourselves to live how others expect us to. And yet, while this is probably appropriate for the internet, because the people out there, like the nameless faces or just like, screen names, like they don't know us intimately. They don't have any real relationship with us. The danger in this can be that this same thinking kind of creeps into our actual friendships. The thought that as a friend, that we don't really have any areas that we need to grow. Like we don't actually need to take into consideration that maybe we show up into friendships and relationships with some rough edges. That our approach to friendship, the ones that we really want to invest in and go deeper, that it's kind of like, I am who I am, like take it or leave it, no sweat off my back perspective. And I don't know that it's helpful when it comes to building true lasting relationships. And again, it feels appropriate to the masses. But when it comes to wanting to look like, how do I show up as a friend? I think we all need to be willing to look inward a little bit and to ask, how am I showing up for other people? Are we the kind of friend that the friend we're looking for is looking for? And to kind of double down on this, I think as Jesus followers, right, those who say, like, Lord, transform me, change me, show me how to be more and more like you, this is a different posture to take. So on one hand, I understand this freedom and this empowerment of taking the posture of like, I'm done caring what everybody else thinks, right? Setting that people-pleasing aside. But then on the other hand, this tension we live in is these questions of like, well, have I hurt a friend's feelings and I just don't want to apologize for that? Or am I not considerate of others? And I actually don't spend that much time listening to my friends. Or is there an insecurity in me or pettiness or jealousy that creeps in and threatens my ability to be a good friend, one that comes with encouragement and joy? Or am I super guarded and I'm like, I don't really want to share anything with you, so I'm just going to keep you at an arm's distance? Or is there a sense of pride or maybe a sense of competition in me that threatens to ruin true connection? Or do I get so self-focused in my own world and the things that I'm interested in, things that I want to do, that I don't really show up for friends when I know they need me or even pay attention to if they need me? Because if any of that is true, whether it's intentional or not, that's something I think we all need to be paying attention to and maybe admit that when we show up to friendships, we may have some rough edges. I think the world's approach could be like, take me as I am or leave me. But I wonder if there's a better way. I wonder if we actually want to learn and live on how to be good friends and engage in doing this well, to building life-giving, connected, meaningful relationships. If maybe we need to shave off some of our rough edges. If maybe we need to look in the mirror and say, man, am I showing up in a way that's easy and safe for people to be around me? Am I investing and engaging in ways that actually create connection? Is there anything in me that I can allow God to change and transform and to shift and grow so that I can show up for someone else, to be the friend that I want someone else to be for me? Is it possible that we all need some refining and friendships are the best way, like being in a relationship is the best way actually to expose our rough edges, to expose the places and spots that we can grow, to show us our own insecurities that we can actively then choose to strengthen? Is it possible that we can gather some tools to allow us to be great friends to each other? Well, spoiler alert, I think there is, right? I think this is like the literal process of God's work in us, this word sanctification, that we would become more and more and more like him. And in reality, is that friendship is just not a status. Friendship is a practice. Friendship is not something that you just have as a status. Friendship is something that we intentionally practice. And so this morning, we could jump to a ton of places in Scripture, but I want to spend some time getting our friendship tools for the How to Friend series from the book of Proverbs. So Proverbs is a book in the Old Testament. It's basically just a bunch of compilations of like nuggets of good thought. Right? It's oftentimes like a 1 or 2 sentence thing that just like packs a punch. And for us today, I think it helps point us in the direction of how to friend well. It talks a ton in there about relationships. Like you guys, I had to cut 40 verses from today. So if you want to like do a study, if you want to gain some great wisdom, I encourage you, go read the book of Proverbs this week. But when you open Proverbs, the book starts out explaining kind of what its intent and purpose is. It tells you from the beginning, this is what this book is for. So let's read Proverbs 1 through 7. It says, these are the Proverbs of Solomon, David's son, king of Israel. Their purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline, to help them understand the insights of the wise. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives, to help them do what is right and just and fair. These proverbs will give insight to the simple, knowledge and discernment to the young. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. Let those with understanding receive guidance by exploring the meaning of these proverbs and parables, the words of the wise and their riddles. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools, they despise wisdom and discipline. So for us, if we want to show up and we don't want to be a fool, being a fool is like, who cares? I don't really need any of this anyway, right? But if we want to show up and be wise and engage in friends well, we would show up and say, okay, what do you have for me? Lord, what do you have to show me and to sharpen me? So based on a ton of verses and wisdoms throughout Proverbs, I just wanted to draw kind of 4 things or 4 tools that I believe will help us all become better friends. I believe will help shave off some of those rough edges and to show up for each other so that we can be the kind of people that the people we're looking for are looking for. So the first one, I'm going to say it like this: be interested and be interesting. So many times our relationships are just kind of talking to like fill in this space, or maybe talking about surface level things, right? For that outer level circle of friendship, these acquaintances, that's actually probably appropriate. It'd be a little weird if all of your acquaintances, you like dove right in, like just on the street, right? So it's like all of the kind of acquaintances. But when we're ready to kind of take that next step, beyond breaking through that acquaintance barrier and begin to allow ourselves to know somebody else and them to know us, we have to be both interested and interesting. And here's what I mean by that. We have to be genuinely interested in the other person. And if we are interested in them, we will begin to ask questions. We'll begin to see the person and we want to know more about them. Not just about what their day looked like, but who they actually are. Proverbs 27:23 says, "Know the state of your flocks and put your heart into caring for your herds." Now, this wisdom could be applied in many ways, but I think it's a huge way is to pay attention to those that you care about. If there's somebody that you consider a friend and you want to develop a relationship with, you need to know about them. You need to know about the state of their minds, and you need to put your heart into caring for them. And you can't care about somebody that you don't know. This goes for guys and this goes for girls. This means going beyond the typical, like, how was your weekend? How are the kids? How is school? What did you do? What are your plans for? Right? It goes beyond those basic questions and getting a little bit more interested in like who they are. And then it's also somebody who listens, somebody who pays attention, somebody who remembers. And becoming a better listener doesn't just happen in like one conversation where you're like, I checked it off the box, had that conversation, as a great listener, I remembered, right? This is a practice that we keep coming back to. And the more that I let this in, the more that I recognize how much this is a muscle in all of us that actually does need to be strengthened. It needed to be strengthened in me. I don't think it's actually intuitive for all of us just to show up and ask questions, right? We either tend to talk too much or we tend to talk very little and not share anything. I can tell you years ago about, we'd go to dinner or have something with friends and it's like, we talked, but I didn't leave feeling like I knew anybody any better or anybody knew, anything more about me. Like it felt so empty. But there are relationships that can be meaningful, but we have to be interested in each other. Good listening asks perceptive, open-ended questions that don't tee up just yes or no answers, right? Being interested kind of peels back that first layer of the onion and kind of probes and says, hey, who are you and what are you all about? Actually, being interested actually recognizes body language. It's like, okay, they're not totally ready to go there yet, and that's okay, right? But it kind of like gently and humbly kind of goes beyond that surface to say, hey, who are you really? Proverbs 18:13 says, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. So being somebody that is interested in our friends and what they're thinking and what they're feeling and what they're experiencing, this is vital to fostering deep relationships, but it doesn't happen if we don't listen to them first. Now, let me just say there's a time for this, right? I had a friend once that was actually a really good question asker, but sometimes he lacked like the knowing the right time. Like we'd be at preschool, like drop off, and it's like kids are crazy and everybody's screaming and you're just trying to get your kid not to cry and like rushing to work and as I'm like getting in the car, he's like, hey, what brings you the most joy lately? I'm like, wow, that's a big question that I'm just trying to like make it to my meeting on time, right? So it's like making sure just because you might have the good question, it's appropriate. When do we do these and when do we show up and ask the right question? But great questions often start with, tell me about. Because that insinuates to somebody is, I want to know about this thing. Tell me about that experience. Tell me about your mom. Tell me about what you know. Tell me about this thing. Why are you interested in that? And then it also tells the recipient, I actually want to know. Like, I'm here. I want you to tell me about it, and I'm here to listen. Now, the direct counter to this is that you must also show up with your own interesting answers. Now, before any of you, which I know you're doing in your mind, you're like, well, I don't know that I'm that interesting. It's just simply not true. And here's the deal. If somebody is taking the time to ask questions of you, to ask you thoughtful and interesting questions, resist the temptation to just answer simply as if you have nothing to say. Step into some vulnerability. Men and women both, I promise you that you are interesting, but only if you allow yourself to be. And I think we have kind of have in our minds it's tacky to talk about ourselves, or that we would risk being too vulnerable. We're will I look dumb? Will I regret sharing? Do they really want to know? What if I don't get my facts straight and I get, something messed up a little bit? What if I share this and they use it against me or they misunderstand me? What if I'm just honestly too much for others? And to be honest, some of that might happen sometimes. It might. But I believe that it's worth the risk to develop relationships, especially with people that you feel this connection to. Authentic friendships are built on mutual transparency, being interested in each other and asking good questions about each other, and the willingness to be interesting and reveal who you really are. Proverbs 13:25 says, "The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed." And I believe those of us who are generous with ourselves will prosper. Those who divulge a little bit of who they are, they actually end up refreshing other souls and then in turn refresh themselves. So being interested and asking good and thoughtful questions that may be clunky at first and a little awkward, but you'll get the hang of it. And sharing about yourself at first may be a little awkward and clunky, but you'll get the hang of it. And this may be one of the hardest things that we learn to do, but I believe it will be worth every ounce of effort. There was a mom once on a sports team that my kids were playing at, and we just kind of seemed to hit it off in that acquaintance circle. I was I think we are vibing with each other. This is good. This could be good. And I kind of had this thought, I'd love to get to know you more. Found you interesting. And so I knew I had to be intentional, kind of stepped out of my comfort zone and texted her and said, hey, and we were traveling at the time. It's hey, once the kids stop hanging out or whatever, dinner's done, do you want to meet down in the hotel lobby and just hang out, get to know each other a little bit? And she was vulnerable and said, sure, I'd love to. So, it's awkward being gonna go meet somebody that I just thumbs up usually on the sidelines. But we met down together, and so we met up, and of course I didn't dive right in, but we did the pleasantries and hey, what's your day been like, da-da-da. And then at one point I had noticed that every time that we traveled, regardless of where we were, she made it a point to attend a Catholic Mass. So as we sat in the lobby, I just said, hey, I noticed that you attend Mass all the time, and that's really important to you, and I think that's really cool. Tell me about that. Tell me why that's a priority to you. And so it started this long conversation about her faith gave her such perspective, and she needed that reminder. She opened up about some different struggles that she had been facing, and I got to open up about some of mine. And we had meaningful, interesting conversation with one another and gave interesting answers back and forth that led to actual meaningful conversation. And that night began a friendship for us that likely would not have happened otherwise. So be interested in the people that you want to involve in friendship, and be interesting, show up, divulge a little bit about yourself so that you can have meaningful connection. All right, number two. Number two is be trustworthy. Now, of course, some of you are of course, this is what every friend, this is on any list that we got, when we were 6. But this is important. Of course, this one is self-explanatory, but it is a defining trait of how to be a good friend. We want to be able to trust people that are closest to us, right? But this is where we so often get burned. When people don't do what they say, when they don't hold a confidence, when they share something and they're not supposed to, when they don't show up, right? We confide in somebody, we take a step to be vulnerable, it gets used against us, we feel misunderstood, and it wounds us deeply. And so we have to take the step in our lives to be that kind of trustworthy friend to someone else. Proverbs 11:13 says, a gossip goes around telling secrets, but those who are trustworthy can keep a confidence. And the truth is, and probably most of the time, this is not malicious. It's just careless, right? We don't mean to be loose-lipped. We're not trying to be mean. We just sometimes often don't take the time to reflect and think, is this my story to tell? Do I have permission to share this? Would this actually, sharing this or doing this or saying this, would this make me a trustworthy friend? And then the other part about being trustworthy is just showing up for those we care about, those who we consider our friends. It's being consistent in this and not just when it benefits us. We all know those kind of friendships where it feels really one-sided. It feels like they just want something from us, but they're not really actually willing to give anything of themselves, and that never feels good. So if you want to form deep, life-giving connections, remaining consistent and trustworthy to pursue those people and want to invest in community and then kind of keeping their thing makes us trustworthy. Proverbs 19:22 says, loyalty makes a person attractive, and it's better to be poor than dishonest. Proverbs 26-7 says, many will say that they are loyal friends. We're all like, oh yeah, totally, like I'm trustworthy, I'm super loyal. But who can find one that is truly reliable, right? The author of this is like, yeah, everyone says it, but no one practices this. But the godly walk with integrity. And the bonus of this one is it actually impacts the generations to come. The godly walk with integrity, and blessed are their children who follow them, who model what this looks like to live as trustworthy people. A trustworthy friend is not just in a friendship for himself or herself. A trustworthy friend will not leave you when life gets messy. A faithful friend, a trustworthy friend says, life got messy, I'm coming over. Being a trustworthy friend is essential to building deep and lasting friendships. All right, number 3 is to pursue wisdom. So being a friend that is wise is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to someone else. It's one of the greatest gifts that we actually give to each other. Because when life happens, when things get confusing or hard or heavy, we all want somebody to be able to go to, right? And in these moments, if that were you, you are likely looking for somebody who can listen well, somebody who understands the situation, who really tries to figure it out, who can give some sound advice when needed. Not just telling you what you want to hear, but actually helping you see every angle and walk with you through it with wisdom. You want someone who's wise. And so that is something that we can all learn to pursue in our own lives so that we can be that kind of friend to someone else. Proverbs 13:30 says, the seed of good deeds become a tree of life, and a wise person wins friends. Proverbs 12:26 says, the godly give good advice to their friends, but the wicked lead them astray. Proverbs 18:20 says, wise words satisfy. Like, have you ever felt that? It's like, that's wise. Wise words satisfy like a good meal. The right words bring satisfaction. Wisdom comes when we know when to ask the right questions. It knows when it's time to speak up and when it's time to just be a listening ear. Wisdom knows when to show up, and wisdom knows when to just pray. And listen, we're not always going to get this right. And the reality is our friends are not going to always get this right either. So we can let ourselves off the hook on being perfect in this. But pursuing wisdom in our own lives and being a wise friend is a gift. So how do we get that wisdom? We can't just like snap our fingers. We're all like, yeah, I want to be wise. Like, that's what I want in my life. But our wisdom doesn't come by our own strength. Our wisdom comes with our own shared experiences. Our wisdom comes with things that we have learned. But most importantly, our wisdom comes by allowing God to be that source of wisdom. Proverbs 2:2-6 says, tune your ears to wisdom and concentrate on understanding. It says, cry out for insight and ask for understanding. Search for them as though you would search for silver. Seek them like hidden treasures. Wisdom is something worth chasing after. Then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord, and you will gain knowledge of God. For the Lord grants wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. We turn to the Lord for insight. We turn to him for continued growth. We turn to him from knowledge and understanding, and he can use all kinds of things to grow us in our wisdom. He uses his word. He uses teaching. He uses the Holy Spirit in our lives. He can use expert research. He can use other people. But if we ask, he will begin to open our minds, tune our ears and our minds and our eyes to see the wisdom that you provide in our life, and then we can begin to offer that as a gift to our friends. Proverbs 17:27 says, a truly wise person uses few words, and a person with understanding is even-tempered. Proverbs 13:20 says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Wise friends give each other spiritual strength and encouragement. Wise friends elevate each other's standards. They elevate each other's goals. They elevate the expectations they have for each other's lives. Wise friends see the real us. A wise friend is somebody who isn't just awed by our presence or personality or what we like is somebody who's awed by God and then sees the real us for who we are, but likes us anyway. Wise friends respect each other's privacy. They respect each other's schedule. Wise friends respect each other's space. Wise friends know when it's time to rejoice and when it's time to just sit in the hard stuff. Wise friends understand the limit of a joke. They understand the limit of just kidding around. Wise friends are those when you leave time with them, you just feel good. You feel uplifted, you feel cared for, you feel strengthened. They bring perspective and they recognize when things are hard and they walk with you with grace and truth. So pursue wisdom in your own life and be that friend that is wise, that is growing in wisdom because it is a gift. All right, number 4, last one is keep emotions in check. This is this principle, this idea that we're just living out the fruits of the Spirit, right? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. These are the things that show that the Spirit of God is alive and active in us. And here's the deal. Our friendships is going to come with all kinds of emotions, all the good ones, the laughter and the memories and the inside jokes and the things that we shared experiences with each other. But the closer that we get to somebody, the more time we spend, we will also experience things like hurt feelings, feeling left out, feeling annoyed, feeling jealous, feeling misunderstood. And when this happens, as it's almost guaranteed to, what we do next matters. So will we be the type of friend that we want others to be to us? Or will we let our emotions get the better of us? Will we let that sarcastic comment slide that we know deep down is meant to be hurtful, but we just say it anyway? Proverbs 12 says, "A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. An honest witness tells the truth, a false witness tells lies. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing." Will we lose our temper? Proverbs 14:17 says, "Short-tempered people do foolish things, and schemers are hated." Proverbs 15:1, "A gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words make tempers flare." Will we let our jealousy get the better of us and withhold encouragement that we know we should give, but we're just honestly too jealous and competitive to say anything? Proverbs 14:30, "A peaceful heart leads to a healthy body, but jealousy is like cancer to the bones." Proverbs 27:4, "Anger is cruel and wrath is like a flood, but jealousy is even more dangerous." Will we be easily offended at everything and read into things and get hyper-fixated on things? Proverbs 3:30 says, "Don't pick a fight without reason when no one has done you harm." Will we be patient with each other and bear with one another as we continue to learn how to friend well? Proverbs 16:32, "Better to be patient than powerful. Better to have self-control than conquer a city." Will we be quick to forgive when asked? Proverbs 17:9, "Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends." We will experience hard emotions in our friendships, but keeping them under control, keeping them in check, keeping them under the scrutiny of the Holy Spirit is essential to building healthy, lasting relationships. So this means taking our emotions, right, naming them, not saying, "Oh, I can't feel that." We feel it, we name them, but then we hold them up to the light and we ask God, "Help me see this how you see this. Do I need to let this go? Is this a me problem, or is this something I actually need to bring to my friend and we need to address? Am I being too sensitive? Am I being insensitive? Am I being jealous? Am I being unfair? Am I letting myself get taken advantage of? And I feel like I need to maybe bring it up in a healthy and wise manner." Right? Emotions in friendship are inevitable, especially as we get close. But keeping our emotions in check, not just letting them live unbridled, like whatever we feel, we just let out, like keeping them in check and keeping them under control, self-control, helps us to be the friends that we want to be and that we want others to be for us. Okay, so that's 4 new things. So let's recap. Here's our kind of 7 things on how to friend. 1, we're intentional, right? We take intentionality with our relationships. We step out, we risk something a little bit. We give it time. We recognize that friendships don't just happen. They require our efforts. We carry each other's burdens. We're interested in each other, and we are interesting. We allow ourselves to be known. We are trustworthy. We pursue wisdom, and we keep our emotions in check. And the good news and the bad news today is that friendships will require work. They'll require dedication. They require effort. Genuine friendships don't just happen by accident. They require us to show up and to invest in them. They are not effortless, but they are worth every bit of effort. Our lives are better with deep friendships in all of them. And so all of us today, I want all of us to walk out thinking of this list and thinking, what can I do? What can I do that helps me continue to be the kind of friend that the person I'm looking for is looking for? What can I do to honor God in how I approach friendship and how I show up in friendship? Because great friendships aren't just found. Great friendships are formed. And that requires some participation in all of us. Let me pray. God, thank you for the gift of friendships. God, they're so complicated and they're hard. And yet we know based on how you've created us, and when we experience them to the fullest, they are worth it. So would you help us, God, as we ask you individually, Lord, where do you see, what do you need from me? How can I shift and grow and change? God, what are you calling each and every one of us to do in our own relational worlds? Would you impress that upon our hearts? Would you allow us to trust you, to trust what you're asking of us? God, when would you bring deep and meaningful relationships to each and every one of us? And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, as a reminder, we've been handing out friendship bracelets so you can remember some of these things. So if you want on your way out, there's those. And then, of course, we brought back the bonus content podcast that we're diving in deeper to each week. And so we'll be on that this weekend, just talking about some tangible and practical ways how to make this happen. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you next week.